Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the MSC Performance Podcast. This is the 10th episode of Series 2. My name's Luke, and today I'm joined by Sonia.
Hi, everyone.
And today we're just going to have a bit of a chat, just talking all things coaching, talking about what you should be tracking in terms of your training, how you can then use that data and apply it and make improvements to your training over like the short and also long term. So it's just a bit more about like the individualization process and just helping you maximize your training time. So before we get into that, what's new with you, Sonia?
If we talk in training, I'm going to talk about training. So training has been going really well, and I think this is really important topic to actually discuss because I think like yourself and myself, when something's not going right, like it's really important to look at the bigger picture. So like first things is like, okay, what am I doing outside the training? So myself, I've been really good lately. I feel like I finally found a good structure. And I think this is what it takes, like to feedback on your own process and, doing those slightly changes, like keeping the process quite interactive. So like overall, like just positive stuff. How about you?
How's the back feeling?
Back is feeling really good.
You're still managing it well. You're still being smart, obviously, but you're able to get good training in.
Yes. And I think it's better than ever in terms of like strength. Yeah, honestly.
Ever? Wow.
Because I think I've finally found a way how to kind of work with your low and high days. So I'm just being a bit smarter. So despite the injury, I think it was a good lesson.
Cool.
As I think every injury is. Fantastic. So I think it did help me as a coach as well, seeing the other point and like how it actually feels and how much restricted you are, but how much can you actually do around it.
Fantastic.
And I was gonna say with this, like feedbacking like yourself, like you had coach, and like when you feel that like you possibly need to change something, or you even changed coach, didn't you?
Yes.
Yeah. So like these are all things like we also kind of like go through and we understand the point of like coach being coached, and when you see some things don't work, you just need to kind of like find what is actually the issue.
Well, the benefit of being coached is giving someone else a chance to make the decisions without the emotional component that comes with it. And not be, I think that when you're coaching yourself, we can all be guilty of being a bit too reactive to things that happen. So you have a great session and all of a sudden it's the best program in the world. Everything's amazing. When things don't go quite as well, like it's a terrible program. We need to change things up. And I think having a coach can help with that, take that emotional decision out of it and kind of just sometimes zoom out and look at the bigger picture rather than judging everything on a short-term basis. But yeah, you are right. I've got a new coach. It's been going really well. I think it's been 6 weeks and I'm back doing like full squat and deadlift now while I was doing like variations before. My body feels great. I had the best session I've had in a long time on Monday, so I'm feeling really good. Just had a bit of a block of less specific work and a chance just to give myself a chance just to feel 100%. And like I said, my body feels great. I'm really happy with the technique changes I've made. And I'm feeling really good. So I'm looking forward to pushing it on. So I guess on that note, we've all changed things recently, but like what are the things that you're looking for to change in terms of like training, or what are you monitoring before making adjustments? Is there anything in particular that you think people absolutely should be? And then if they've got the big rocks covered, is there anything else that they could maybe add just to get those last few like 1%ers out of there?
I think if I look at it like from the perspective of, okay, so here's your new plan and there's some sort of structure you're going to work with. I think like the first week, possibly first 2 weeks, you kind of find in whether it's actually like fit in within your schedule. How does it all feel like? How you find in, let's say, if you have a rest day between the sessions, like, are you recovering enough? Or if you have session back to back, is it maybe too much? Or even like exercise selection, like if you possibly have like a deadlift followed by, some squat variation, like, are you feeling actually good for it? So just kind of feeling and monitoring, observing whether the plan kind of feels good. And I think if it kind of does, and there's something wrong, or you feel something's not going right, what I'm looking at is obviously the outside picture of like, am I actually getting enough sleep? That's probably the first one.
Yeah.
Like I know if my sleep is all around the place, or I'm being very like, normally you have some sort of routine, but I know if I'm like, let's say I have a bit of like staying a bit late at night and stuff, I know it kind of impacts my training. Or if you set yourself like today, like you didn't have good sleep, like you know you're not feeling yourself, and I think that kind of can impact the session. Not always, but this is one thing I really look at, like how's the sleep been, how's my diet been for like not just like one day, but like maybe in last couple of weeks. And then also like stress levels. If we're talking about like external factors, like I know that when something's going on or when I have too much in my mind, the training is always a little bit all over the place. Hence, I'm not really like upset about it, and I don't really blame the program itself. Yeah. I know that there's something else in it. So then I just like do some minor adaptations to it. As obviously I wouldn't like just let training go, but I think like when I adapt it, like almost like auto-regulate it really helps, or that's at least what works for me. But then if we're talking like into training, changing in program, is this what was your question, right?
Yeah. What are you tracking? What do you think is the most important things to initially track?
Well, first things first, I think like the overall volume. So how much work you're doing, and then what I personally look at is like, let's say how much of a knee dominant stuff I do, how much of concentric stuff or concentric work, eccentric work I do. Is it kind of balanced? Do you do enough of that, or are you missing something out? So I make sure that like all my week has all the bits it should have. And this is probably what I track to start with, like how much work have I done, volume in terms of like sets and reps. So have I snatched, I don't know, 4 times a week or 3 times a week, or did I miss a session? So this is the first thing I look at.
Yes, I think what you're saying is you've got you're trying to find for people a gap between the minimum effective training that they can do and the most that they can recover from. So people call it the max recoverable volume and minimum effective dose. You're trying to find a sweet spot in the middle. And some people are going to prefer to be near the minimum effective, and other people really want to push on. And there's risks and benefits to both. So I think what we're saying is that to begin with, we're tracking your volume, and then we're also tracking your external variables as well. We'll get into the variables that we like to track, but you touched on sleep, you touched on nutrition, and I think they're the big two. I personally like to let people before a session have these like fatigue indicators, and the 3 are sleep, readiness for the session, and then desire to train. And just letting people think about where their sleep's gone, how are they feeling for the actual session, how ready they're feeling, and the ready takes into account everything like the nutrition, their sleep, how sore they're feeling, and how like well they think the session is going to go beforehand. And I think just thinking about these things, it takes into account like the other external variables, is a good thing to think about. And like you said, from there you can start to make little adjustments to your training if you need to. So I often give people a score of 1 to 5, and then give recommendations based off what they're scoring. So if you add them all up for a maximum score of 15, if you're getting 5, that's fantastic. Everything should be great. Session should go amazingly. It won't always, but it should do. But if you're scoring 1s and 2s, then maybe it's time to make adjustments and letting people be a bit more flexible with their training loads. And I think these are going to massively link into tracking your overall training volume. So you can either do the tonnage, which is sets times reps, or you could do just the amount of working sets, which I prefer to do now. I just track the overall sets. So I track it both for certain movement patterns. So for squats, how much squatting you're doing, how much single leg work you're doing, but also how many sessions you're doing a day. And then you can kind of work out from here how people are recovering, and then you can decide if to up the volume or lower the volume. Yeah,
exactly. You said so. Like you probably start with it first, and then some people will adapt well. Some people will find it maybe too like accumulation of too much fatigue. So this is probably where you're doing those little changes afterwards. So that's how you kind of use the data from the volume perspective, or like the exercise selection perspective.
But you've got the fitness fatigue model, and with the fitness, with the strength comes the fatigue. So when you're pushing things super hard and you're going for that maximum that you can recover from, you risk pushing it a little bit above it, and then fatigue creeping up higher than the fitness, and then your ability to actually train comes down. But then there's also the negative of if you're aiming for the minimum all the time or less than the minimum, you're missing out on the actual stimulus to train. So we're trying to find the sweet spot. And it's a moving top, which is difficult because people think, oh, squats for me, 10 sets a week, and that's perfect. But it's a moving target, and it comes into effect with everything else that you've just said. So you get people working shifts and then they'll have a week off and then all of a sudden training is amazing because external stress has been reduced. They're sleeping better. They're able to eat as and when they want to. Then they go back to work and all of a sudden it drops back down. And you need to take these into account. So I think like a good place to start off with is these little indicators beforehand of tracking how well you're feeling for the sessions, how well recovered you're feeling. And then from there, like zooming out, you can start to make little adjustments to the amount of training volume that you're handling.
I think I would say that like, so people maybe have the idea that, I don't know how about you, but I think I kind of have like the up and downs that like, it's still trial and error. So like, it just doesn't go that smooth that like, okay, I now found the sweet spot and that's just how it is. Like it changes, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So like sometimes, because you just said like, how would people know that like what's actually too difficult for me? Like, can I push a little harder or am I just holding back? Like you gotta try, but then I think it will always be a bit different because like in terms of the external factors, it will always be something going on. Yeah. So as you said, sometimes the stress like is reduced, but sometimes it's a bit higher. So it really depends when in your training block you're at, like whether you're like at like some sort of high intensity or, you know, a bit more like generic stuff, like a bit more like building and stuff. So I think like, I just wanted to say that like people should maybe think that like there's no wrong and right, like it's always trial and error. So if something's going good, let's keep at it. See how we progress on that.
What we're looking for is we're looking for like a decent starting point, because then if you miss it by 10% either way, you're still falling within what is an acceptable amount of training. But if you shoot for the stars and aim for a ridiculous amount of volume and then you have to start adjusting, you're massively off target. So we have these general recommendations which we get from the literature. So like if I start with a new client, they average around like 10 sets per like body part if you were working on like a hypertrophy phase. So you can start with that as your starting point, and then you can see like you can have your little different things that you're tracking. The main one for us is obviously going to be your performance and your output in those sessions. So if you're finding you're doing 10 sets of, let's say, bench press a week, and your numbers are trending down, it's then looking at these variables and saying, okay, you're not getting stronger on the lifts that you said you wanted to get stronger, or it might be you want to get bigger, you're not getting bigger, your measurements aren't getting bigger, etc. Let's look at your training volume. Are you doing, like, how are you feeling? And if it's every session, I feel amazing, like I'm feeling really fresh, maybe you could have a little bit more work. If you're coming into your session, like how are you feeling for session 2 and you're feeling absolutely battered, then maybe because you're not making the progress, you might be on a risk of just doing a little bit too much work, just bringing that down just a touch and then seeing how that affects your training. So I think taking the external variables and then linking it into your performance outcomes and kind of gauging where you're at and then making the smart adjustments from there is a good starting point and something that everyone should do.
What do you think about like the level of enjoyment and how important is this factor on the training improvement?
I think it's ridiculously important. And I think it's massively undervalued. And I think there's still people that think it doesn't matter if training's enjoyable, as long as you're making progress, but that only lasts for so long. And ultimately, if you're going to stay consistent with a training program, you need to be enjoying it, which is one of the reasons why in like the Barbell Club, we ask people for their input into their training blocks. Because if I'm giving you feet up dumbbell press and you hate doing feet up dumbbell press, or you hate barbell and you want to do something else, you're coming into that session, you've already got this negative mindset, you're not looking forward to doing it, you're just automatically going to take a hit from your mental perspective coming into that session comparatively to actually enjoying it. So the enjoyment is massive, both for like actually your mental perspective during the session, but also just your ability to stay consistent with a training program.
I can't agree more. Like I know it myself, like as you said, like some people would say, oh, it doesn't matter as long as I'm progressing, but it only lasts a certain period of time. Like if I'm on a fat loss program and there's so many ways to skin a cat. Like you can do so many things to lose fat. You could say go and do 10,000 steps. You could say go and do HIIT. You could say go and do half an hour on the bike. And if you say to me go and do half an hour on the bike, and I fucking hate going on the bike, I'm not going to do it. But if you say, look, we need to do one of these 3 metrics, see which one you enjoy the most. And then that's all achieving the same things, but it's the consistency over time, which is going to get the results. And you've got this like hierarchy of the most important things. And actually the main one is the consistency of training. You could have the best program in the world, and if you only turn up once or twice instead of 4 times a week, you're definitely more likely to skip a session, find an excuse. So like I just wanted to basically say that like enjoyment levels are massive factor on this.
I think when you're looking at like things that you absolutely should be tracking, I do think you should be keeping an eye on enjoyment, but the big rocks are how sore you're feeling,
Mm-hmm.
how much volume you're doing, linking those two together. Tracking your sleep and your nutrition is a good idea, and putting a score on it and just thinking about that is a good idea, because you can start to see the trends then that occur over time. So you notice, like you said, you don't know to begin with how much the sleep affects you. And there's always going to be outliers. Like there'll be days where you don't deserve to do a good session. Like you think everything's off. I've had a sausage roll for lunch and I've slept 3 hours and I've PB'd my lifts, and there'll be days where like 10 hours sleep, and it goes shit. There's only so much you can do, but like the trends occur over time, and the trends will kind of, they're leaving out. So the majority of the times when you're feeling good, the session will go good.
So basically, like, let's say if you as a coach receive your feedback from, or let's say if we're just going to be specific about barbell, like that's why they're really important for us. Like I can see the numbers, I can see you hit 3 sessions, I can see your sets, your reps, the weights. Okay, I can see that maybe it's better than last week, which is great. But then I don't really know how you feel about it and how was everything else outside. And it's really important for us, like, to see that point. Like, let's say if, exactly as you said, like the soreness, like what if you are just constantly sore? Like being sore doesn't mean that, like, oh, I'm just probably working out. I don't think you should just be sore, like
you're always going to be slightly sore. There's levels to it, isn't there? You're going to be slightly sore. When we do the feedback form for Barbell Club, it's a scale of 1 to 10. And I think an acceptable level is sub 6. But if you're coming into every session at 7 or 8, or 8, if you're 8 out of 10 sore and you're trying to do a heavy squat or deadlift or anything, it's not going to be enjoyable. So you're going to be put off doing it. And the more you put off doing it, the worse you're going to be soreness, because nothing creates soreness like novelty. So if you miss a week of training, you come back in, you're going to get sore, you're not going to enjoy training. And it's just a vicious cycle of you trying to get back into the gym, every time getting sore and then quitting again.
And then obviously if it's too low, it probably means that, like,
we could probably push a little bit more. It's really good to see when people start out, because I'm really proud of how we're very smart with the training part when people come in, and we use introduction weeks. And the introduction weeks for a reason. Like a deload is to recover from the fatigue that you've created in a block. An introduction week is to prepare you for the upcoming block. So the preparedness shouldn't be as big or as daunting as a normal week. So if you imagine it's like a pyramid of week 1, week 2 is a little bit higher stress, week 3 and week 4 are higher stress. You have a deload where it drops right down, and then you repeat, but over time it's all trending in the right trajectory. Your introduction weeks to prepare you for the session. So if you're doing an introduction week and then you're putting a 9 out of 10 for your soreness, it's not prepared you. It's been a working week. So I think we've really got a good system for the majority of people, and I really like it when they put a 4 to 5. The negative to it is that they think they're not working hard enough, especially if they're used to seeing, these beasting videos online where they think this is the amount of training they should do. And I always think, like, a lot of people expect that to be the model that you have to do to get stronger, while absolutely no one trains like that. I had with a barber and he was chatting about like forced reps, and when we're telling people to work to like a 6 or 7 RPE, it's going to limit the amount of like muscle soreness. But we know that the reps above like a 9 RPE aren't really they aren't productive for creating more strength or hypertrophy. As long as you're working within like a 5 or 6-ish RPE, you're doing enough of a stimulus to get strength and hypertrophy. But still, people are used to see people doing forced reps and doing like a set of 8, and then their friend assisting for 2 or 3 more reps. And Bob actually said that this is that's where the growth happens. And it obviously doesn't, but this is what people think. So when we get people in, and a lot of it's education about saying that, you only put a 5 or 6, but that is a good reason, because we're looking to increase the volume. We're looking to increase the intensity over the block. We're just setting yourself up for good, productive training. We're trying to minimize the amount of soreness that you're creating, so you can actually put together another good week.
Great. I think like this is a good summary of like those couple of bits, as we said. So like volume and external factors, and then that's obviously all collection of some data, right? So
before you go into the next ones, because I got one more point. Sorry. Yeah. I also think like when you have like a weekly feedback, so I have a weekly feedback form, and it's a chance just to analyze the training, and then you can compare it to last week's training. So like with my coach now, at the end of the week, I have a daily feedback, and then I have an on average week, and it's how good my nutrition was, how good my sleep was, lifestyle factors, which from his notes I think means have I got pissed that week. And then it's like, there's other, and it's like, then it's a chance for me to think. It's a chance for me to look at my sessions and be like, okay, the training went really well this week, and my sleep was good, my nutrition was good. And then mentally, I mean, I already know this, but if you didn't, you'd be like, okay, there's a real correlation here between my external factors are on point and now my training is on point, compared to if I have a week where my life, I have an easy life, but if I didn't have an easy life and I had like shift work, etc., and my sleep was shit and my stress was high and I'd been out and got drunk a couple of times and my training went bad, I can then start to make these kind of links and be like, oh, I've noticed actually that when everything's a little bit lower, the outcome of my training is worse. And you need to add up then what's important in your life, because there'll be times where it's important to go out and socialize and get drunk.
Definitely, yeah.
And there's times where you want to push your training.
It's like reflection is important in general. So if we talk in training, I think if you're doing it daily or possibly like, daily feedback, I think that's great, because like every day is different, isn't it? And then bigger picture. And then if you collect the data, you can have it monthly.
Well, this is absolutely that's Sonia. So we have your weekly feedback, which we've just spoke about. So having a look at the week on an average, how has the week gone? How has the week left you in terms of soreness? We've got the daily that you spoke about, which is your sleep, your nutrition, based off the day, and then how the session went. I also like to track, which you're starting to track a lot of things here, and it can get a little bit complicated, but session RPE, which is the how difficult you found the session on a scale of 1 to 10. I really like to track that because I think it's a good indicator of how much work you're doing, your outcomes further down the line. If your session RP is around a 6 and then it spikes to a 9, maybe something's happening there that we need to assess. But I really like tracking those. The big ones for me is your sleep, your nutrition, your training stress, the amount of sets you're doing, and how hard you're finding the sessions, and tracking these over time and trying to avoid any spikes in in total volume or difficulty. So you got your weekly, you've got your daily. We're going to talk about intra-session, and we're also going to talk about monthly and yearly. So we'll talk about monthly now.
I was just going to say that I like the saying, what's get measured, get managed.
Oh, you're horrible.
No, it's a good one. Come on, that's Pat.
I knew, because your English isn't that good. So whenever you tell me something like this, I know that it's someone else that said it. Big Pat Davis.
That's mean.
I'm joking. No, absolutely. So like, if you're coming in and you're like, I don't know why this is going bad, like,
you need some data to assess, and like that's why we really encourage you to, like, everyone who takes the training seriously or want to progress, you should be collecting your data. Like, I really like the old school type. Some people do like notes. The books.
Mate, the book is the most organic thing you could do, because even the handwriting shows you how well the session is going or how hard it is. When the writing's all crap, it's like, she or he has worked really hard, or they has worked really hard. Versus if it's very, 100%. I'm a massive fan of a notebook, and there's something about actually bringing your intent then in the sessions, and it just shows that you're dedicated to the training process. You're probably taking it a little bit more serious, and you can make organic notes. Like I do it on a laptop, and you miss out on the organic notes. You could do a set, and then in that set you can write down hip throws or this happened on the squat, legs are sore. You can write organic notes. I'm a massive fan of a notebook. We're going to come back to that one in a second. So what are you tracking on a monthly? Is there anything that you like people to do, or what do you think is a really good starting point for people when they're looking at like macro cycles and mesocycles? What should we be looking at?
So I think like for a mesocycle, probably ideally you have some sort of things you want to achieve through the block, or maybe there's some issues you want to work on. So if we target 2 or 3 things, or possibly just one thing, and you're really trying to nip it down, but let's say after the 4-week block, like I assess, like, okay, have we improved that? Like, that's the main thing we've been focusing on. So I would say that this is probably the most I focus on. So like, if you have a set work, how did that go? How was the block? What were the good things of the block? And possibly did that block discovered some other issues?
Because no block's perfect, but you need to get the data of what's good and what's bad, and then you can make the adjustment. The idea with training and putting together successful cycles is that over time you should be getting more accurate with what you're doing. So you might do and a great example is your client Ada, who said to me that we had this training block where we look into the performance testing on week 4, and her best performance was week 3, and then week 4 it tanked. And then knowing that training data is fantastic. And if she sits down and says, well, actually, week 3 was amazing, week 2 was good, week 4 absolutely tanked. And then you start to think, well, actually, then maybe it's because we did 3 hard weeks, and then just the fatigue was creeping too high because she was lifting weights she'd never lifted before. 3 weeks is the sweet spot. On that 4th week, performance is going to tank. So when you're thinking next time I've got a 4-week block, I start a little bit lighter. We talked about the progressions in terms of intensity and volume. We start a little bit lighter, we progressively build up, we save a little bit more in the tank. So then we know that for week 4, where we're aiming for that maximum performance, we've got it. And like you can use this. This is beg your pardon. This is massive for like if you're doing a weightlifting competition or a powerlifting competition. One of my clients, Amy's got a competition coming up, and we've noticed that when she does like, because she's a big deadlifter, she's a good squatter, but she's not as good of a squatter. She's crap at squatting. She's a very strong deadlifter. She's a very strong deadlifter. She's a very strong conventional deadlifter, which creates a lot of stress and a lot of fatigue. And if we do the last deadlift, the heaviest one, the week after, there's normally a bit of a performance drop. So if we do the heaviest deadlift a week out, she gets to the competition, fatigue still stays high, doesn't lift as well at the competition as maybe we want her to. So what we do now is we take the deadlift 2 weeks out. The week before is an easier deadlift. So then come the competition, that little bit of a down week then allows us to then reach up a little bit higher for the final week. Yeah. And this is the training information that when I started with, I didn't know.
You didn't know.
You have an educated guess, but now I know, same as you know with Vader, you push things too hard for too long, gonna have a divot and a down week performance. And that down week, you want to try and time it on your deloads. You don't want to time it when it's meant to be on your performance testing.
Again, it can change over time because obviously the stimulus was new to her, lifts and the weights she's never done before.
So next time she does a training block, she won't be lifting PBs for 3 weeks in a row.
Exactly, and that's just what happens. Like you got to consider the level or the base you're starting with. So like if it's a novice lifter or if it's a beginner, or if it's like a new stimulus training, the adaptation and the progression will be different.
And the difference is going to be for someone like yourself that's getting stronger all the time is that when you've gone from let's say you do, I don't know, not weightlifting because that's still a bit different, but let's say like you're doing squat and you've gone from squatting 110 to 130. All of a sudden, the actual amount of training stress that you're creating is going to be a little bit higher. So for yourself, it might be the opposite, that you're actually not able to train as heavy for as long because the training's heavier. Even if you're working at slightly lower percentages, the amount of training stress is going to be higher because the actual number is higher. I
know. Well, you say yourself, how often do you like squat close to your 1 RM?
Well, the reason I think Europeans went bad is because I was trying to force the progress. My body wasn't ready for it. And I spent too long trying to push weights that I weren't probably able to do well. And then it tanked when I got to Europeans. It's a horrible learning curve. And it's the worst place to have done a down performance, where it's lessons learned about trying to force things when they're not there. And I would have gone a lot better if I'd have used it back. And I know that now.
But then now you know, and you can use it.
Next Worlds, I mean.
So at the
So at the end of a training block, it's a good idea to then think about what has been successful, what hasn't been successful. And then you can think about like the lift variations as well. So if you're trying to push, we keep saying squat because it's a good example. Let's say you're trying to push your squat hard, you're trying to improve your 4 rep max, and you know, Sonia's giving you a new secondary squat exercise. It might be a high bar, it might be a pin squat. You might have done the pin squat for the first time and noticed that actually you don't feel as good. Even though your pin squat's gone up, your main squat doesn't feel as dialed in, the technique feels a little bit off. And then you make that note in your training log that pin squat doesn't seem to be a good exercise for yourself. We know next time not to give you a pin squat. You might say, actually, it's really helped with my position in the hole. We know in future that could be a great exercise.
But then again, there needs to be some time potentially to develop that skill on it. So
big
maybe
time. You can't do it for a week.
It straight away.
You can't do it. You've got to give things time to actually adjust. And I think 8 weeks is a good length of time. I think you've got to give anything a block or 2.
Definitely.
1 week is not a long enough time. You need to let things start to see these trends. But you should be analyzing like how well you think the block's gone, how hard you found the block in terms of the training volume, what exercises you think have worked really well. And then write that training data down. And then for the next time you're writing a block, you can use that to help guide the next training block. So it's like squat went fantastic. I'd added in belt squat, bit of extra volume, went fantastically well. Or it could be I've added in leg press and my quads were too sore. My second session was not going as well. My overall training's down. I don't feel too good. So next time we can ease that back and change the exercise for something either less stressful or change it for like a completely different focal point.
I just kind of like stressing of how much of a difference it makes when you, after a block, let's say, you get a really good feedback, like overall, not just like after the block, but like when you know that your client is feedbacking regularly, like that work, just like the interaction is just so easy. like it's so easy to work with people who kind of like feedback you back, and it's just a circle which is kind of like going back and forth.
It's funny to me because I get people that are like, oh, I'm sorry if I'm giving you too much information. It's like,
no,
like it might not all be applicable, but
Yeah.
it's still great information.
Yeah.
And I'd much rather have that than trying to draw fucking blood from
I
the stone.
really struggle with like people who are not maybe so sharp with the training, like they miss a session or two and then they really slip with the feedback as well. Like it's really tough for me to work with those people as well. I don't know, like I think like as a coach you find it yourself as well, that like obviously if you have the data you can work further.
It's a two-way street, isn't it? Like it's not down to the coach to do everything, and it's not down to the lifter to do everything. There has to be a two-way, and the more that they can input, more input, the more you can input. If they're not filling in their training program, and if they're not writing anything down, and then they come to you and they ask you for your advice, you've got nothing to work with. So it's definitely a two-way street.
Exactly.
And ultimately, you can choose how much you want to track and how little you want to track, and it's down to yourself of how important it is. But we've got the big rocks that we spoke about, and then we've got these little rocks that we spoke about as well. And I think covering the big rocks is really important for everyone, because there will be a time when training is not going well, and there'll be a time when training is going fantastically well, and it's good to have that information and make these links over time. I guess to finish up with then, if we talk about like is there anything that you like to track or make, not even track, but like look at like during the session? Like we're big fans of filming lifts just to get like visual feedback. 100%. Is that something you encourage people to do? I know it is, because your client in particular, Catherine, bless her, loves the tripod. She needs to buy her own tripod. I'm going to send her a link to Amazon. But no, it's great. It's because obviously she's weightlifting and these little details really matter. So she needs to film it.
Yeah, big time. I mean, you know, it's like you ask the client to send the like either like your top lift or something you really struggled with. So fair play if they film everything and then they pick. Yeah.
But even if it's not for you, it's for them as well, isn't
exactly.
it? I gather she's quite, in the grand scheme of it, she's quite new to weightlifting. She's been doing it about a year.
I think she like, you know, like you with time start to understand. And like if I approach the issue, what she's doing, she kind of sees it herself. Yeah. So I think like that.
If you're working on a particular, like let's say triple extension, she can film it and be like, oh, I've noticed that one is slightly early or whatever.
So exactly. Speaking of videos, I'm a big fan of this because, like, obviously the coaching eye improves with time. Like, how many people
do you ever share any training videos? Do you ever put any training videos? I've never noticed.
No,
just
really, just keeping it for myself.
Get out of here.
No, back to that. So, as I said, like the more people you see lifting, like various people's, like, you know, you've got tall lifter, short lifter, and I don't know, like how many times you've seen people snatch, and, you know, like this all kind of adds up to how quickly you can actually appraise it yourself. Yeah. But then I'm still a big fan of like videos because of the slow-mo, or just going back to it and like kind of trying to find what the issue is or what could we do better.
Every single person's got individual differences that they'll need to work on.
So if I work with client remotely, I definitely would like to see some bits of the training to have some sort of idea. And especially if we're working on something, if it's like a technical block, you know, if it's before competition, I think you often have like a one-to-one session because it just makes massive difference.
Mate, like you can only pick up so much in the video.
Exactly.
But like absolutely, this should be filmed as well for you, but also like you'll get one or two sets, but for themselves, like if they've got a particular thing, keep talking about squat, if they've got a particular, let's say they're squatting, then out the hole, the hips are shooting back, and you've given them a couple of cues to work on. It might be like bracing, it might be like weight distribution, and you're telling them to look for that in the videos. Then they can watch that back, and then when they see the hips rising, they can then start to look at like, what did I do slightly differently? Is my bracing looking as good? Have I done this? Blah blah blah. And it's really good to get that little feedback from, because we know that when you've got the feed, even like during a set, if you feel like there's negative, you've done a lift not as well, and then you can correct it yourself from just how it feels going into the next repetition. And that's the same with the videos. If you're doing a set, let's say deadlift, and the bar's coming away from your legs, and you know that that's going to make it a lot slower off the floor, it's going to make it a less of a forceful position to begin with, and then you watch the video back and the bar's 2 inches away from your legs, we know, okay, I need to keep that bar pulled in, and you can use that like instant feedback to then adjust the next set.
Like sensation is one thing which I think is super important, but then like I film my sets myself, you do yourself. Well, I don't have the coach with me there, and yes, I feel what I've done, but then like the video is just the best.
I definitely think that the sensational fit, I mean, I think that comes with training age as well. Like you can say to someone like, oh, what do you think you did wrong in that set? And they won't have a clue.
Yes. Oh yeah.
It all feels the same, and there's so much variation.
To be fair, I always question people with this. Like,
you gotta get them to think.
But as you said, like training experience, like and I actually like an honest answer, like I have no idea. That's fine. Then I'm here to tell you why. Yeah. But obviously it kind of helps me as well, because usually it kind of confirms.
Big time.
So videos, good shout. That means, Mark, we need more tripods.
More tripods, 10 tripods, please.
No, Mark said enough with that, guys.
Yeah, he said, didn't he? I remember when we were setting up MSC, the initial aim was to have TVs at the back of every thing with like an instant, like a 30-second loop. So like it would film your lift and then 30 seconds later it would be on the telly. Everyone's like, I'm just watching on this. It would have been sick.
Need that.
I'll speak to him about it. It's been 7 years. Now's the time. But yeah, so you're tracking you're filming your lifts in between.
You know that now everyone will film them.
It's great. We buy your own tripod, they're £5 now. Like I've got a selfie stick that I use. It's great. Everyone else is like fighting over the one good tripod. Just buy one for £6. It folds up into like a 15 centimeter
That's
stick.
why no one uses it, because you basically hide it. Because it's so small.
There you go, mate. Put it in my massive bag. So yeah, we're tracking we're filming your sets to get that technical feedback.
Yeah.
We're also obviously tracking your RPEs just to make sure that we're not training too hard or too light. And again, RPE, the accuracy, we know that over time, the accuracy comes as we do more training. We know it's more accurate as it gets closer to failure. So asking someone to get a 6 RPE can be quite difficult. But again, if you miss it by one, or let's say 1 rep, you're still going to get the stimulus. If you're missing it by 5 reps, then you're in danger of either missing reps or shooting too low and missing the stimulus. So we like people to think about their RPEs after the sets as well. And then you can make adjustments then for your other sets. So let's say you got 3 sets of 5 at 7 RPE. You do your first set, and if you don't think about it, you might just do all the weights at the same weight. You might have undershot, not got the strength stimulus or the hypertrophy stimulus you're after. But if you have thought about it and you thought, yeah, okay, that was too heavy, I'm going to reduce it back a couple of percent, or it's too light, I'm going to adjust it. You're going to get a little bit more out of each individual session. And we know that training is about stacking together good sessions, and then stacking together good weeks, good blocks, good months, good years. And then that's what ultimately gets you the results that you want. So I think thinking about your RPE and filming your sets are the big 2 that you need to be filming during the session.
Can't agree more.
Fantastic. So that's a lot of information about what you should be tracking. And it sounds like a lot, but when you break it down, I think the big ones are mid-session, intra-session, beg your pardon, be thinking about your technique, maybe filming you so you get some good technical feedback, and then think about your RPE so you're getting the strength stimulus. As a session on a whole, I think you should be looking at your sleep, your nutrition, and letting that dictate and adjust how the session is going to go, and maybe adjusting your numbers. For the week, you're trying to get your weekly feedback so you can link that in similar to the daily. And then at the end of a training block, you're assessing what went well, what didn't go well in terms of exercises, in terms of stimulus, how sore you are, etc. So there's a few things to think about, but if you're serious about taking your training up a notch and you really want to try and make sure that you're taking care of the essentials of your training, I think these are it. And even if you're at that novice level, these are things that you can be thinking about. And it literally takes a few minutes of your day and maybe 5-10 minutes at the end of a training block. And it's going to help you improve your accuracy, and it's going to help you improve your actual training over time, which is going to get you the results you want.
I think it just confirms like train with intent and like think about it a little bit more, reflect. If you want to get something right, or if you want to improve, you need to spend a bit more time on it. So
big time. Yeah. That's it. Ultimately, it's time in the trenches that's going to help you get better. And I think, the more time you can dedicate to your training, ultimately the better. Everyone's got other stuff on, but I think 5 minutes is not asking too much, and I think that 5 minutes is going to get you a massive return on your training. So I definitely think it's worth doing. It's things to think about. Cover the big rocks, and reap the rewards.
Luke. Yeah, thanks for chatting. It was great.
Thank you, everyone. As always, if you have any input or if you have any questions, you can fire them over either Instagram or via our email. And if you have any ideas about future podcasts, anything you'd like us to cover, please let us know. And until next time, we will see you later.